Admiral, I want to make sure I get this right. Iran's ambassador to the UN warned today that Iran, quote, would decisively respond to any attack on the country, its interests and nationals under any pretext. One, do you have any reaction to that warning? And two, more specifically, could that be read as a tacit acknowledgement by Iran that the U.S. can keep the Mideast conflict from expanding if President Biden shows restraint in his response that may be forthcoming?
Folks that need to show restraint are these groups that Iran backs. But nevertheless, I would just say a couple of things. First of all, as we've said many times, we don't seek a war with Iran. We're not looking for a broader conflict. We're not looking for a war with Iran. That's number one. Number two, we have obligations in the region, including those to our troops and our facilities. And now, as Karine reminded everybody, those attacks have taken the lives of 3 of them. We will do what we need to do to make sure that those responsible are held properly accountable.
Is there attribution yet of which militant group or groups were behind this?
We believe that the attack in Jordan was planned, resourced, and facilitated by an umbrella group called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, which contains multiple groups, including Kataib Hezbollah.
Was KH the principal behind it? 'Cause they seem to have fingerprints of this sort of precise attack.
As I've said, I mean, this certainly has the earmarks of the kinds of things that Kataib Hezbollah does. But again, for our purposes today and the question you're asking, the attribution that our intelligence community is comfortable with is that this was done by the umbrella group called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq.
Thank you. John, can you tell us more about the latest hostage proposal that is supported by the U.S. and the Qataris? The U.S. ambassador to the UN said today that it envisions a much longer humanitarian pause than we saw back in November, plus more food and water and medicine. What details can you tell us?
Not a lot, and that's on purpose, because I don't want to say anything from the podium that could torpedo these very sensitive discussions. Nothing is negotiated until everything is negotiated, and not everything is fully negotiated at this point, Nancy. I will tell you that in broad strokes, we are looking at an extended pause is the goal. How long? That's all part of the discussions, but longer than what we saw in November, which was about a week. We'd like to see a longer pause than that. Not just because that helps facilitate the movement of so many more hostages out. You can get more people out if there's a longer stoppage in the fighting. But so it can also give us an opportunity to increase the flow of humanitarian assistance in.
We've heard 45 days. Does that sound about right?
I'm not going to talk about the details.
And can you talk also about, it's been shared that this would be a multi-stage process where civilian women, the elderly would come out first, then perhaps soldiers, corpses after that. What can you tell us about the notion of a multi-stage process and why that would be preferable?
The goal of an extended level pause is so that you can get the maximum amount of hostages out. The modalities of that, should we be able to get this in place, of who's coming out when and what sequence, is all part of the discussions right now, so I'm just not going to get into that.
How has Hamas responded, if at all, to this latest proposal?
I would just tell you that the discussions that we've been having and are continuing to have been constructive. They've been, we believe they're moving in the right direction. But again, I don't want to come across as too sanguine here, and I certainly don't want to get into the actual details of it. And I hope you all can understand that. I mean, the last thing that I'd want to do is say something from up here that all of a sudden gets inserted into the negotiations and becomes a sticking point. We want to see this deal in place. We want to see it in place as soon as possible. These families are grieving, and they want to see their loved ones again. We want to see if we can facilitate that, but obviously, you know, we're mindful of time.